I remember I was just walking through a park and thought, I'm going to open a gym. And I just opened a gym. Powerlifting is very much an emerging sport. It's not a young person's sport. It's not an old person's sport. It's anybody's sport. When you go through any form of trauma, whether it's mental or physical, your brain goes into hyperlearning. If we're lifting, you tear a hamstring, your brain goes into hyperlearning. It remembers what the lift felt like. It remembers what the warm-ups felt like. And it won't go away. It'll just burn into your brain. You're hyperfixated. I'm injured. I can't lift now. I can't train. I'm not going to be able to do my competition. And the job as the coach beyond that point is to try and unlearn all that stuff. This has happened. Let's forget it. Let's start to focus on what we do next to get you back on your feet as soon as possible and do our very best to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
All right, today's special guest is Thomas Lilley, powerlifting champion and coach, owner, founder of Zero Weakness Gyms. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Hello. How you doing?
Very well, mate. Appreciate you taking the time to come in and have a chat with us today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Mate, awesome. Now, powerlifting, it's a pretty unique sport. Can you tell us how you got started in it and what do you love about it and what keeps you motivated?
Yeah, sure, man. I started powerlifting when I was about 18 years old. So for those who don't know, powerlifting is squat, bench press, and competition. Squat, bench press, and deadlift in competition. You get 3 attempts at each lift, so it's similar to Olympic weightlifting, but different movements. So I started getting into it when I was relatively young. I was interested in it from age 16 and got heavily into it from 18 to 20. I really love the community aspect of it. I'm a very individual person. I'm a very stick to myself kind of person, especially in any difficult pursuits. Like I like hard things. I like problem solving. I like challenges, and I like to do it on my own. So like if I reflect on uni, I did a lot of group projects or group assignments where I just did the whole thing. I'm like, guys, I want to get a 7. I can tell you just want to pass. That's fine. I'll do the whole thing because I'd rather rely on the result, my result being because of me. So I always struggled with team sports because of that. Because if the team fails, I just see it as I only want to fail because of me, not because of other people. So the cool thing about powerlifting is I still get that, but I also get to exist within a community at the same time. Whereas before, I competed in freestyle BMX, and that was very individual. There was still the community aspect, but it was very, very individual. So I did love it, but what I really love about powerlifting is the wider community. It's a unique sport where you're competing against each other, but rooting for each other at the same time. Yeah.
Interesting. So BMX and then powerlifting, that's 2 different spectrums, isn't it?
Yeah. What happened, I was riding BMX still competitively and powerlifting at the same time. Then I had a pretty bad spill on my bike, whacked up my head pretty bad, ended up in the hospital for a little while. And I was wearing a helmet. And if I wasn't wearing a helmet, I'd probably be a vegetable or dead. So I was going through uni. I was like, at the time, BMX was a very underground sport. It wasn't like it is now with Logan Martin winning gold and bringing huge sponsorship money and all the energy drink companies and so on. It was very underground. There was no real future for it. And I sort of had to make the executive decision as a young adult. My brain's probably going to serve me better than my bike, so I better preserve it. So I kept riding for a while, but put it aside mostly for powerlifting.
Awesome. How did you transition into the coaching element of powerlifting?
Man, I was working for the government as a nutritionist, and when the government changed and Campbell Newman came into power, he got rid of a lot of preventative health roles. And so we had a workforce of about 170, and within a couple of months it had more than halved. And so our necks were kind of on the guillotine, and we were like, what are we going to do? I got offered a position out in Roma. So for those listening who don't know where Roma is, it's 9 hours into the middle of fucking nowhere. I'm allowed to swear, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's 9 hours into the middle of nowhere. And it was a choice of do that or find something else to do. And I remember I was just walking through a park and thought, I'm going to open a gym. And I just opened a gym. That was legit. It was a spur of the moment decision. And just 6 months later, I found myself in a gym, and I had no qualifications as a coach, no idea how to run a business, how to run a gym. Just opened it up and figured it out.
How long had you been actually powerlifting when you made that decision?
I opened the gym. We actually turned 11 this Sunday. So I opened the gym 11 years ago. I'm 34 now, so I was 23. So I'd been powerlifting for about 5 years.
Oh, congratulations, 11 years. Good milestone.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very well done. So powerlifting, what sort of role mentally, what mindset do you need to be successful powerlifter, and is there any specific processes that you use to prepare your athletes mentally for a competition?
It's a really interesting question because powerlifting is very much an emerging sport. There's not a lot of people that have been doing it for a long time, and it's got a relatively short life cycle. You know, you think of professional sports, you normally have people, by the time they're professional athletes, they've played the game for 20 years. And then as they go through their career of maybe 10 or 15 years and then come out the other side to coaching, you have 30, 40, 50 years of experience. Powerlifting's not like that. It hasn't even existed for that long, barely. And so it's very much an emerging sport. And the mental side of things, you have to be okay with monotony. Powerlifting has a very late inflection point as well. So you have to learn to deal with failure at a later point than most other sports. You go out and play rugby, you get hit in the first game. You get tackled. You might even lose the first game, lose the first 10 games. If you start powerlifting with me today, a good coach, you're going to win. As in, you're going to not fail weights very often. You're going to go through competitions and have relatively successful days. You might not hit a wall or see massive failure until a few years in. And it's very easy at that point for lifters to have a meltdown and be like, it's all falling apart. I'm going backwards. I can't deal with this. So a lot of mentally preparing means pointing the direction in terms of the bigger picture. The gift of experience is knowing what the future looks like, what things look like with a broader time horizon. And a lot of lifters can't see that. So they'll go to a competition, fail a lift that they had in their head for the 6 months leading into the competition and miss all the progress that they've made along the way because they've attached their emotion to one particular number. So learning to teach lifters to disconnect emotionally from the weight on the bar, see the number as an arbitrary measure of resistance. That's the challenge as a coach, and it's an even bigger challenge as a lifter.
A great way of looking at it. What about ages? Is there particular ages that you said with that lifespan that people you find have a degree of success?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's not a young person's sport. It's not an old person's sport. It's anybody's sport. It's another really cool thing about powerlifting. You know, if you want to, again, I'll keep using the example of rugby. I know nothing about rugby, by the way, so I don't know why I keep using this example, but you're probably not going to start playing rugby as a 35-year-old, hit the NRL and have a 10-year career. You can do that as a powerlifter, and you can be the best as a powerlifter with a relatively late start. So it's really cool. And then not only that, of course, as you get older and older, there's different divisions, so you can be the best masters lifter. And so it's not necessarily age restricted in that sense.
Because I believe you've got a couple of older, so what are some of the ages of some of the older athletes that you're coaching at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a woman in mid-60s who she just recently squatted her first 200-kilo squat.
Wow.
Which was fantastic. She deadlifts around the same, 190 to 200.
She's in her 60s.
Yeah, I've got a male in his 70s. I think he's 74. He bench pressed 140 in competition recently. We've had lifters as old as 80 plus in the zero sphere, and as young as kids under 10 years old.
That is amazing. Just trying to imagine my old man's 80, and I haven't got any vivid pictures of him underneath a bar squatting, but that's fantastic. So there's hope for us all.
There's hope for us all. Exactly. Exactly.
So speaking of strengths, powerlifters are obviously very strong athletes. Can you talk us through how important technique is in the sport and what a typical training program might look like to be a champion powerlifter?
Yeah, I mean, technique is very widely argued in powerlifting, and it's because, again, it's a very underground sport. So if you look at athletics, you look at any professional sport, if you go to the top running coach, sprinting coach, high jump coach, you're probably going to get much the same technical direction. You go to 5 different top powerlifting coaches, you're going to get vastly different opinions because we're all just making it up as we go along. Everyone's just still figuring it out. I've been a large proponent of technique for a very long time, and I believe that's what set Zero apart and sort of pushed us ahead of the pack. And my view on technique is very similar. You think of Mark, right? You're the guy that you've been working with, ex-physiotherapist. I look at human movement the same way a physiotherapist would look at human movement. So if you bust up your knee, you go to see someone like Mark, he doesn't have to take a photo, a measurement, X-ray, MRI, CT scan of your knee, send it away, get a perfect model made of your knee, get it sent back, bring you back and say, hey, this is your knee. This is what's wrong with it. This is how we're going to fix it. Fuck that. He just reaches under the desk, pulls out a model knee and says, you're a human. You have a knee. This is how a knee works. This is how we're going to fix it. That's how I look at technique for squat, bench, deadlift, which is kind of unique to what we do at Zero. We look at, we're all the same animal doing the same movement. Within these movements, there's certain biomechanical rules that apply to everyone. The big difference is that we admit that. All coaches believe that. They have a picture in their head of what a gold standard squat, bench, deadlift is, and they work towards it. But a lot of people will argue that they don't do that. Everyone does it, though. Everyone does it. So technique is absolutely important. If we boil it down, you think powerlifting is 1 rep max, squat, bench, deadlift in competition. The way you express your strength is through how you move. So technique is everything. Everything from a coaching perspective, including the mentality, comes back down to technique in some way, shape, or form. How you build a powerlifting program comes down to technique and how you move and how to improve that movement. So yeah, it's big.
Yeah. Is it going to vary a little bit depending on the athlete of any natural abilities or natural physique elements, or is it all primarily the same?
Less than you'd think. There's always going to be some element of individuality in it, but far less so than you think. And the power of, again, experience and foresight is being able to look at an athlete and say, even though this change in your technique now doesn't feel good, it will perform better in the long run. And that's where I build a lot of the trust with my lifters, because if you come to me and you're like, I squat 140, you squat over 300, teach me how to squat, the trust is inherent there. Like, you just see me as being stronger than you. But if I get a lifter come to me that squats 400 and I've never squatted over 400, then they have to trust what I have to say, and I have to be able to show them that I can do that. And so having experience of working with these freaks for a long time allows me to at least present that to people. But yeah, the individual aspect of it is not as vast as you'd think it is.
Yeah. So it is still that movement, and then there's particularly biomechanics attached to that movement, and then you just train towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big part of the individuality of coaching is figuring out how I can get this athlete to come towards whatever my gold standard is, rather than change my gold standard to match the athlete.
Yeah, well said. So everyone faces obstacle and setbacks in their lives. Can you tell us about any significant challenges you've encountered either in your business or powerlifting career, and how and what you got through it?
I struggle to answer this because I guess part of my, I don't want to say success, part of the reason Zero hasn't failed is because I don't see failure. I don't go into things. It's not like, okay, here's failure, here's how I can avoid it. To me, that just doesn't exist, which is a bad thing because you make a lot of potentially dumb decisions. I'm lucky that things haven't failed. But if you've only got a success mindset, you figure out ways to make everything work no matter what obstacle or setback comes. And so I'm not it'd be very hard to get me stressed or upset. And so even when I've had things that would objectively wig people out from a business perspective, whether it's I've had people try and shut the gym down, try and dob us into council, try and get crazy things involved for whatever reason, we've had issues with people in the past. I'm pretty relaxed about it all. It doesn't get to me. If I were to sort of speak about a setback with like my own lifting, I've had several hip surgeries. I've got bad hips. But I see them less as setbacks or obstacles and more as lessons that has gifted me the ability to have a broader reach when it comes to being able to talk to lifters about how to deal with injuries and how to, because I'm very serious about my lifting, but the people that I work with are probably more serious than me. And me being able to empathize and guide them through the process of an injury and what the mentality needs to be to come out the other side of that, I've been gifted with that, with the issues that I've faced. So, yeah.
It's a great way of looking at it, because at the end of the day, like you said, with life, it's not a setback if you're still pushing forward, and it's a learning.
Yeah, it's a
and like
lesson.
you said, and those lessons in particular, like you said, from a coaching perspective, if you didn't have any personal lifting setbacks, then now that gives you obviously puts you in a great position to be able to communicate that. Because I see that as one of the biggest issues with people, that a setback being an injury because you just want to train, and being told that you can't train for a period of time because of an injury can be a bit of a mental setback for a lot of people.
Yeah, what happens is people, when you go through any form of trauma, whether it's mental or physical, your brain goes into hyper learning. So like if we're lifting, you tear a hamstring, your brain goes into hyper learning. It remembers what the lift felt like. It remembers what the warm-ups felt like, and it won't go away. It'll just burn into your brain. And the job as the coach beyond that point is to try and unlearn all that stuff. Because every time that you then go to do that same lift, your brain is just going to be like, your hamstring's going to tear. It's going to pop. It doesn't feel right. It's not good. And in that moment, if you're hyper fixated on what happened, you're hyper fixated, I'm injured, I can't lift now, I can't train, I'm not going to be able to do my competition. You can't control any of that stuff because it's already happened. You need to very quickly, like I love it when I'm there, when a lifter gets injured versus when I'm working with someone online and they message me and say, hey, I've torn my quad or something. When I'm there in person, I can be in that exact moment and start to get in their head about, this has happened, let's forget it, let's start to focus on what we do next to get you back on your feet as soon as possible and do our very best to ensure that this doesn't happen again. You've got a very short window of time to work with before that moment, that injury, that experience gets so deeply burned into their brain, can make it 10 times longer to get over it.
So isn't it well said from that mindset perspective of just how important that coaching role is in that particular moment?
And I mean, I couldn't do that unless I had experienced injuries myself.
Yeah, exactly.
And like so much of an athlete's experience in competition, in situations like that, in training, whatever, will be affected by how you present yourself as the coach. So if they get injured and I'm like, oh, no, this is bad, of course they're going to freak out. If I'm super chill, super relaxed, if I'm calm, if I know the next steps to take, they immediately calm down. They immediately know that they're in good hands. They're immediately a little bit less stressed about what's going on. It's a really important quality to have. Same thing at competition. If someone misses a lift and you freak out, oh, what do we do? Can't do any of that stuff.
That's similar. It reminds me of parenting, like when your child falls over and you see some parents, the way they carry on, and then you wonder why the child becomes hysterical when the parent's behaving hysterically. It's like, mate, you've fallen over, you've taken a bit of bark off, let's move on, it's all good.
Yeah. I love the delay as well. Like you see the kid fall over, look at the parent responds, and then the kid starts crying. They're like, am I meant to cry? Am I not meant to cry?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so that from a coaching perspective, do you have any key philosophies or principles that you can share with us?
I definitely do, but all of my principles are built on that notion of technique and around that idea of we're the same animal doing the same movement. So I struggled with that question a little bit because I didn't know what that's getting at outside of that. Like, what do you mean more than that, I guess?
It's probably if there's anything in particular, like if there's any particular coaches, and I think you've spelt it out already with that you're very much in those basics and not trying to overcomplicate things. And then in particular, I love what you shared just then in relation to that mindset, because I think that that's supremely important, that as that role of that coach, it's not just there from a technique side of things, but also very much from a mental side of things to get that athlete prepared. And I guess having that winning mindset, knowing that you know what they're capable of, which may be more than what they think that they're capable of when they first come to see you. Because at the end of the day, with your experience, you're able to say, hey, listen, I think that you're actually capable of this, where that athlete might have just given themselves a bit, not as much credit.
Yeah. I'm sure you've been exposed to language around like the thinking and the feeling brain and everything like that. Just the way I'm wired is the feeling brain doesn't really exist for me too much. I'm very much the thinking brain. And so I'm not everyone's coach. There's a lot of lifters that need a little bit more communication, a little bit more coddling, a little bit more cheerleading. I'm very much the coach for the athlete who's just like, I'm going to be the best, I need to be the best, and I need to get someone to do the thinking for me. That's where I really shine as a coach. And that's not to discount the fact that I've had to learn the skill of like tactical empathy and really listening, really learning communication. That's all very important elements of coaching. That's been pivotal in me getting better as a coach. Absolutely. But yeah, my coaching style is very much taking the thinking out of it. And the reason I do that is very much what I was saying before in terms of team sports and wanting the responsibility to fall back on me. If you're coming to me and you're expecting to be the best, I don't want you to make the decisions. I want to make the decisions for you so that when you're successful, I can say, hey, that's because of your hard work. If you fail, I can say, I fucked up. I messed up your program. I didn't talk to you enough. I didn't do the right thing here. Like it's a form of ownership that I like to have because if someone's entrusting me with their success, yeah, they got to put in the work. Yeah, they have to train hard. But if they've done all that and it hasn't worked, I want them to be able to point back to me and say, that was your fault. And I'm happy to do that. And I feel like that level of accountability has forced me to get really good as a coach as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that very much answers the question.
Mm.
So beyond just being the best coach and certainly the most successful powerlifting coach in the country and arguably the world, you're also an entrepreneur. Are you able to share some insights into how ZeroW started and how you're expanding the brand not only nationally but internationally?
Mm-hmm. There's some big calls in there.
Yeah. It's a big question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd identify as an entrepreneur, but I think it's kind of happening automatically.
I think it's definitely happening. And like you said, it may have just been happening, I think, organically. But yeah, love to hear a little bit more of the story, how it started.
Yeah, it's just kind of fallen into my lap a little bit, to be honest. Like, I started the gym 11 years ago. And at the end of 2019, I was mentoring a gym who was trying to get out of their gym. I was mentoring all their coaches. They were switching their online to their business to completely online. And they asked if I wanted to buy the gym, and I said no. Then they asked if I knew anyone who wanted to buy the gym. I'm like, I can ask around for you. So I asked a few people. They all said no. And then I said, look, I'll buy your equipment. And they said no to that. I was like, okay, well, I'll leave it to you. I kept mentoring them. And out of the blue, I had an ex-client call me up and basically be like, look, man, my long-term dream is to open a gym. Do you have any advice for me? And I was like, well, sorry, he texted me. And I was sitting there thinking, and I'm like, maybe I should just offer him to buy this gym. And I'll help him out. I'll buy it with him. So I was like, well, do you want to turn your 3-year dream into like 3 months? Because that's how long we've got. And he said yes. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So I just opened a second one. COVID hit about 6 weeks after we opened, so that was nice. That shut us down, but thankfully we had government assistance and all that sort of stuff to keep us going. And then it just sort of started working. And then I had another opportunity. Someone else came up and sort of wanted to do the same thing, and I thought, yeah, I can do this. And the reason that ZeroW has worked compared to other strength gyms, most strength gyms go down one of two routes to try and scale. They either bring on more coaches, and what happens is they bring in a coach because they're a good coach, but then within a few months they realize, oh, their coaching philosophies don't line up to mine. They're talking different to their clients. They're representing my brand now, and they're doing stuff that I don't like. They clash, they fall out, happens all the time. The other route they take is contractors. You can run your business out of my gym. I'll help you. I'll get you clients. They do that, and then they give them a springboard to then get bigger and start their own gym elsewhere and become a competitor. Where we've really shined is I've only opened gyms with people where I can scale my coaching. And I've done that by creating a coach development system where I teach people how to coach exactly like me. And no one's done that. There's no like plug and play system where you can take our understanding of the principles of human movement, the language we use, the problem-solving strategies, the programming strategies. Nothing exists like that besides what we do with ZeroW. And so I can teach my business partners to just be me in terms of the coaching stuff. And that's allowed us to replicate that. And so we've done that in Australia. We now have 5 gyms with a 6th on the way in Australia, a 7th and an 8th that should come next year. And then I had a guy working for me online in the UK. He's now opening one that opens in a couple of weeks. And in New Zealand, we open in March. So, yeah, it's getting good.
Yeah, that's a big expansion. Can you talk us through the online? So you do a lot of online coaching as well. Did that evolve as a result of COVID?
No, not really. But so I was a front runner in online coaching in like 2013. Very few people were doing online powerlifting coaching in Australia. I say very few. I actually didn't know of anyone. So I might have been the first, but I'm sure other people were doing it. It was big in bodybuilding already by then. And so I got huge as an online coach between 2014 to basically 2018. And then I started to downturn a bit as my focus became more on gym stuff. And so our online coaching reach is good, but it's not a primary focus now. It's very much the gyms. So we have a big online coaching business attached to it all, but it's not as huge as like the big online fitness coaches you may see out there.
Yeah, and so obviously it's not your number one focus, but it's there to be able to have a reach to some people that physically can't get to
for sure
come in to see you guys.
For sure, it's an incredible asset to have, especially even in the local scene, to build hybrid options where some people might be just outside of your reach in terms of geographically. They may not be able to come and train all the time, but they can come and train sometimes, and then when they can't train, they can get online assistance as well. It's a great little arm of the business to build in.
Yeah, no, perfect. So nutrition. Now, you've had a background in nutrition. It obviously plays a significant role for any athlete. Are there any particular rules or metrics that you use that determine what powerlifters eat, and what would a typical diet for a powerlifter might look like?
Yeah, I mean, like it's much the same as eating for performance with most sports. Like you're obviously going to have a relatively high output of energy compared to the average person. We're breaking down muscle quite a lot, so there's a slightly higher protein requirement than the average person. But I mean, in terms of figuring out what people eat, we're still using the standard dietetic practices of like calculating a BMR, like a basal metabolic rate, and then timesing it by an activity factor, and then going from there by feel. It's not like all powerlifters just eat enormous amounts of food. You see the same wide variety in terms of what people can tolerate and what people need as you would in the general population. But it's on average skewed a little bit higher as well, but nothing crazy, especially when you compare it to something like bodybuilding or strongman. Those guys eat. They really eat. But powerlifting is a relatively low output sport compared to the average endurance sport, for example. Like we train 4 or 5 times a week for a couple of hours where most of it is resting. It's not from an output perspective, it's not that hard. And I mean, some people might see that as sacrilegious for me to say, but when you've got an understanding of like, you know, look at an Olympic swimmer training 8 hours a day of high intensity. That's hard training. Yes. Yeah, going to the gym and lifting some weights and sitting around with your friends. Yeah, there's aspects of it that are hard, but not crazy hard.
So do you have it in, obviously when there's weight categories within powerlifting, so some of those lighter weight categories, is there a consciousness not to overeat to maintain that weight level? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and that exists in every weight category besides the super heavyweights, yeah. And so the idea with nutrition and body composition in powerlifting should be to maximize the muscle that you can carry in your weight class at the leanest that you can be. And there will be a point, because as you lift continually and get stronger, you're going to get bigger. You're going to grow muscle. So there will be a point where to maintain your weight class, you have to eat less than what's going to drive performance. That's when you make the decision to go to the next one. Yeah. And as a coach, for a lot of lifters, we have to push that decision for them because they become very emotionally attached to the weight class that they're in.
Yeah, okay. So you're finding obviously with a lot of those particularly younger athletes, as they get older, then they're climbing up into higher weight categories as they're naturally just growing and improving their muscle.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Structure and federations for powerlifting. What structure do they operate under, and how's that evolved in the past decade or so? And would you mind explaining the role that you and ZeroW have played within that space?
Sure. Powerlifting federations in Australia have been messy since 1988. It's a bit of a shit show, and there's been massive ebbs and flows. If I was to boil it down to something simple, because I'm definitely not going to bore your listeners with the politics of powerlifting, because for me, who's heavily involved in it, it's extremely boring. But if I was to boil it down simply, the problem with powerlifting federations is that they break off, start a new federation because they're unhappy with the current one, but then they copy and paste the model of the previous one.
It didn't work.
Exactly. And so they copy and paste all the same problems across for the most part. And it's often run by people with no people or business skills. And you have to run it as a business. It has to run as a business because what's the primary focus of any business? The business exists to satisfy the customer or the end user, right? And so people copy and paste it as a self-serving thing or out of spite to what they hated and left in the first place. You have to have the focus on the customer. And Zero has been supporting a federation in Australia called the APL, Australian Powerlifting League, which is the fastest growing and currently the biggest federation in Australia, because I believe the president of that federation is doing a really good job of that. They're extremely people-focused. They're listening to the lifters. They're listening to the meet directors. And they've set up a structure that financially rewards the meet directors so they can grow the sport at grassroots.
Yep. Is that a national or international federation?
It's national. So It's the Australian Powerlifting League. However, as far as I know, they're about to create an international body as well. And me having Zero and being sort of supportive of that federation will align it with the Zero in New Zealand and UK as well. Yeah, so we'll take that federation, and as we were talking off here before, I have ties in the Pacific Islands, we'll take it over there too. So straight away we'll have an international presence.
Yeah, perfect. And where do you see that going moving forward?
Don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, I'm boring to ask those questions too because I never think past the next 5 minutes. Yeah. It has the legs and the potential to be massive. Yeah. But it's honestly focus on the steps that are ahead, which is set it up in the international locations, start running competitions, start drumming up interest, support the lifters, support the meet directors, and take the next organic steps from there.
So meet director, elaborate on that.
Oh, that's when, so the federation normally has meet directors, which are the gyms like Zero that'll host the competitions.
Right.
So they'll run the competitions. And these are often just local gyms. So they're just local gyms and wherever, Cairns, Mackay, Melbourne, Sydney. And these meet directors make their living out of their gyms, and certain federations take all the money from those competitions that they run. Whereas the APL lets the meet director collect all that money with the hope that they will then reinvest in their gym, get bigger gyms, get more clients, get more advertising that will then come to the federation. So it has to be like an ecosystem if it's going to grow.
100%. Like you said, it needs to be run like a business. Coaching moment. Can you recall a specific coaching moment that was particularly rewarding or inspiring for you, and what made it stand out?
Oh, man. I've had a lot of amazing experiences as a coach over the years. But in 2014, I coached a guy by the name of Jason Semler. And he became the first Australian to bench 272 kilos, which is 600 pounds raw. And at the time, that was the #1 bench press ever done in Australia. And for me, that was my first ever experience coaching someone to a #1 thing bigger than like winning the local champions or winning the national championships in that federation. It was like an all-time thing, irrespective of anyone else in the country. Since then, I've done heaps of those #1s, but that was the first #1. And that's a special. Since then, we've broken that all-time bench record 9 times, and no one else has broken it. So I've been the coach of that 9 times. It was, I think, 4 times with Jason, and now a new guy, Andrew Cooper, has the all-time bench record.
So when Jason did that 270 bench, what was he tipping the scales at?
I think it was about a 140.
140, okay.
Yeah.
So he's still a reasonably big boy, but that's a big weight.
He's a big guy, yeah.
And those other records that you've broken, have they been in the open categories or have they been in some weight classes as well?
So 140 is a weight class, and then 140 plus is like the open, and it's been in both.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jason broke it under 140 a couple of times, and then Andrew Cooper, the new guy, he broke it at 140, and then he's pushed it higher and higher and become the first Australian or a person in Australia to bench 300 kilos raw. He's currently the number 10 in the world.
What's the current record?
In Australia?
Yes.
306.5. Yeah, 306.5 kilos.
That's incredible. That's a big number,
That's
isn't
a freaky amount of weight. Yeah. And well, if you ever get the opportunity to meet the guy and see his arms are the size of your torso, you'll understand where it comes from.
Yeah, well, that brings me to the next question, because obviously when you're lifting that kind of weight, you obviously need some pretty decent equipment that you want to be relying on, and you're manufacturing your own powerlifting equipment at the moment. What's the story behind that?
It's honestly come out of necessity with opening the gyms. So with opening the gyms, we need specialty powerlifting equipment. There was previously only one or two companies that I was willing to buy stuff for, because all the other suppliers in Australia either they lacked one point of a triangle, whether it's customer service, price, or quality. Often it was the quality. If they had the quality, customer service was shocking, or the price was ridiculous. And so there were only two companies that I was ever willing to buy from. One of them was the worst customer service of any company I've ever dealt with in my entire life, and they're since finished. So I had to find a replacement for that. And the other one, great customer service, best quality out, but the price, oh my God, the ludicrous prices. And so out of necessity of needing this stuff, we were working on for a while, how can we solve this problem? And just recently we've figured out how to do that at scale. And so we originally only set out to make equipment for myself or for Zero. People see it happening, they're like, I want one of those. Where do I get one of those? And so it's just naturally evolved into supplying other gyms.
Yeah. Because I've seen some of your equipment. Now that you mentioned that story, so you've got a bloke tipping the scales at 140, lifting 300. So he's putting almost half a ton into a bench. So you want to be laying on something that...
very much so. Yeah, very much
just
so.
to try and put it in perspective, that's, so that high quality gear when you're lifting those sort of numbers.
Exactly. And I mean, it's funny you say that, because we get so complacent with weights when we're exposed to it. So like the idea of you walking into a gym and seeing someone bench press 250, there's only like 5 people in the country that can do that. Whereas we see it every week. So we see Andrew on the bench benching 250 and we're like, don't worry about him. It's just 250.
He's just warming up.
It's only 250. You know, we forget how crazy these weights are. But also it's a bad thing, because we forget how dangerous that can be. Like it's not, even though we know it's light to him, if something actually goes wrong, that weight can kill someone. So yeah, there has to be a lot of thought and quality that goes into this stuff.
Yeah. So I know as far as the future goes, and you're only looking 5 minutes ahead, but do you sort of have you thought about a type of legacy that you'd like to leave within the sport?
Oh, I mean, like I have no interest in anyone knowing who I am, but I'd like the legacy of Zero not to be Zero, but the thing that inspires people to do something like Zero. There's absolutely no reason. People look at what Zero is doing and think it's something special or out of reach. There's absolutely no reason why multiple brands can't be doing this thing. Like I draw inspiration from McDonald's, you know? Like it's a copy and paste kind of thing where you can go to any McDonald's anywhere, get a Big Mac and know what to expect. There's no reason why a Burger King, a KFC, the equivalent of Zero can't pop up and do this anywhere in the world
consistently.
Yeah, and so it doesn't exist in the strength sports world. There is no brand that has a growth arc like this, but just this way of having multiple locations that offer the same product. So I want other people to see that and start doing it. Not for them, not for me, but so powerlifting gets better, so the lifter has better access to equipment, better access to competitions, because I want to share the love of lifting that I've found with everyone else who's also involved in that.
And importantly, that's the ultimate legacy, isn't it? That the sport that in which you love is being able to get as big as that it can be internationally, and as many people can experience it as possible.
Exactly.
Righto, quick fire question time. Ready?
Hit me.
So if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would that be?
So is this alive or dead? Or one of each?
Up to you.
Okay. Alive would be Alex Hormozy.
Yep.
Dead would be Nikola Tesla.
Yeah. All-time favourite movie?
The Matrix.
Smartest person you sat in a room with?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Who's he?
You don't know Neil deGrasse Tyson?
No.
Do you know Neil deGrasse Tyson? Wow.
Educate me.
He's a famous astrophysicist.
Oh, okay,
so
that's why.
You'd know the face if you saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd probably know the voice if you heard it.
Wow. All right, I'll look him up. Your worst vice?
My worst vice, video games.
Memorable career highlight?
I struggled with this one. I'm going to cop out and say anytime after a competition, I'm sitting and looking at my team.
Because I should just point out, because you're the holder of a few powerlifting records nationally. That's correct, isn't it?
Oh, you mean my lifting career?
Yes, lifting career, sorry.
I don't really have a lifting career. But yeah, sure. I have the biggest ever equipped total in Australia. So let's say that one.
Yeah. No, that's that's a pretty big claim to fame back in the day. And it's still current, isn't it?
Yeah, I only said it this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was in April this year. The
Congratulations.
reason I brush it off, for those listening, equipped powerlifting is where you wear special suits to help you lift more weight. So it's great to have the number one in Australia, but I coach lifters who lift more than me without the suits. So they could just write equipped on their entry form and beat me. Anyway.
All right, describe your attitude in one word.
Chill.
Best book?
Oh, Sapiens.
Your strongest powerlifting movement?
Probably these days the deadlift.
Deadlift. The best advice you've ever received?
Don't bite off more than you can chew. Bite off more than you can chew and learn to chew like crazy.
What are you most proud of?
Zero.
Morning routine?
I wake up, I walk the dogs, come home, have a coffee.
Influential mentor?
I'm going to cop out and say Alex Hormozy again, even though I'm going to say Chad Wesley Smith. Chad Wesley Smith really reshaped how I do powerlifting coaching. I went and spent a week with him in America. He was a huge coach, one of the most well-renowned coaches in the world back in the day. I hung out with him for a week, and that really changed the direction of my coaching.
Favorite superhero?
Spider-Man.
Childhood idol?
Matt Hoffman.
Powerlifting in one word?
Fun.
All right, last question. Question 26. Finish this sentence. I believe.
I believe you should leave a positive impact on anybody you meet.
Awesome. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the show, Thomas. Appreciate you taking the time out, and mate, awesome chat, awesome insights, and again, love everything that you're doing and how you're growing the sport and what Zero is all about and all of your ethics, mate.
Well, thanks for having me, Magnus. Appreciate it.
Mate, all the best.